Come, everyone who thirsts, come to the waters. Come and eat.
Numbers 25, and in my Torah commentary, I have some comments about Pinchas, or Phinehas, we say in English. That's Numbers 25, Bamidbar 25. And as you recall, the nation of Israel, Balaam, the false prophet, and Balak, the king, weren't able to overcome Israel through the frontal assault, through false prophecy and that kind of thing, through putting a curse on Israel. And so Balaam did the backdoor approach, and as you all know, he brought in beautiful women. I don't know exactly how it worked out, but basically Israel fell prey to the wiles of the heathen women, the sex-worshipping, sex god and goddess worshipping Canaanite women. In this case, it was the Midianites of Midian. And they were fornicating with some of the Israelites were fornicating, having sexual relations, even out of marriage, with some of these beautiful women of the world. And it was bringing a plague across the people of Israel. Many were eventually going to start dying, and it was to the point where even some of the leaders were getting involved in this illicit sexual perversion. Elohim did not forbid the Israelites from intermarrying with the heathens. That is, let me rephrase that, with people of other nations. That wasn't the issue. Interracial marriage was not the issue. The issue was marrying people of different religions who were idol worshippers, heathens. I mean, after all, Moses himself married a Midianite. Zipporah was a Midianite. But it appears that Jethro appeared to be, or Yitro appeared to be a righteous man. We don't know much about him, but he seemed to worship. After all, he was a descendant of Abraham through Keturah. So these were distant. The Midianites were distant relatives of the Israelites, but they had become pagan. They had left the faith of Abraham and the God of Israel, and so they had gone into or assimilated into the Canaanite religious systems of their day. And this was, of course, several hundred years later, since the time of Abraham. So Moses married a Midianite, but she did not have the faith or to follow him, and he put her away. They actually divorced her. We don't know why or exactly. We can only surmise. Some of the Jewish sages speculate about this. But she did not follow him into the wilderness. And then later on it's recorded in I don't know if it's Kings or Chronicles, I have to check, that Moses' sons, at least one of them became an idol worshiper. Moses had a tough time even in his own family. It was not easy. So Elohim and Moses married Zipporah before he encountered Elohim. So it was, in a sense, before his conversion. Many times people marry people before they know the Lord. Remember, the burning bush incident happened after he had married Zipporah. So, anyway, move forward. These Midianite women seduced some of the men of Israel, including one of the Israelite princes. And we see in Numbers 25, Phinehas or Pinchas, the son of Eleazar or Eleazar, and who was the son of Aharon or Aaron. Literally, he went in to the tent where this Israelite prince and this Midianite woman was she a Midianite or a Moabitess? I think she was a Midianite. Anyway, they were they were having sexual relations. It says a woman of Moab actually in 25. But anyway, 25 verse 1. But anyway, Moab and Midianite, they were all, in verse 6 it was a Midianite woman. So Moab, who was actually, remember Moab was a grandson of Lot through an incestuous relationship with his daughters. Moab and Ammon were his grandsons. So they were descendants. Moab was a descendant of Abraham. Not Abraham, but Lot, who was a nephew of Abraham. And then Midian was a direct descendant of Abraham. He was a grandson a son of Abraham through Keturah. And so here these people were seducing Israel, and Pinchas or Phinehas went in and he executed judgment. He found this man and this woman, Cosby and Zimri, having illicit sexual relationships, and he took a javelin, took a spear, and literally right through the body, and he killed them on the spot. Now that seems really radical to us. Well, is he like some vigilante taking the law into his own hands and doing this? And we say, wow, that was really brash. And yet Elohim commended Pinchas for his zealousness and gave him the priesthood. In other words, through his descendants, the priesthood would come. Well, let me just set something really clear here. I just put up a blog post this morning. I started writing yesterday. I finished this morning. I don't know if any of you saw it, but I addressed this issue. It's my latest blog post on my blog. But I addressed this issue. You can go back and read it and get the details. But Pinchas was within his legal Torah right to do what he did for two reasons. For two reasons. First, he was a Cohen. He was a priest. And the priests were given the responsibility. They were the judges in Israel. Any matters that were too difficult for the elders to handle were brought to the priests. And they're the ones that judged. And they would listen to the witnesses, 2 or 3 witnesses, and you can go back and look at the scriptures. It's all there in the Torah. And they were the teachers of the law. They were the ones that taught the Levites and the Kohanim, who were Levites, the priests, were the ones that taught the law. But they were also the judges. And they also were the executioners. Or they at least pronounced judgment. And then it says in the Torah that if you see somebody committing certain acts that are capital offenses like adultery or fornication in this case, consensual fornication, then the person that saw it, he or she is to be the first one to cast the first stone against that person when they stone that person to death. Remember, that's what Yeshua said to the Pharisees who caught the woman in adultery. He is without sin, cast the first stone. Well, evidently, there were none of those who were without sexual sin in that group because they all slunk away guilty. But the person that was without sin and had seen that act the Torah says you're to cast the first stone. And so, in this case, Pinchas was doubly justified in what he did. He was a Cohen. He knew the law, and he was a judge in Israel. I mean, he was a direct descendant of Aaron, the grandson, and he also was an eyewitness. And as you know, we read here that he was commended for it. That's Numbers 25. It starts in verse 6, goes through 9. And there was a plague that was ravaging through Israel, and 24,000 died, it says in verse 9 of Numbers 25. And then Elohim says, Then Yehovah spoke to Moses, saying, Pinchas, the son of Eleazar, the son of Aharon, the priest, has turned back my wrath from the children of Israel, because he was zealous with zeal among them, so that I did not consume the children of Israel in my zeal. Therefore, behold, I give to him my covenant of peace, And it shall be to him and his descendants after him a covenant of an everlasting priesthood. And we see that in the future, the sons of Zadok are going to figure prominently in probably in the millennial reign, and that's another discussion. He was zealous for Elohim, the end of verse 13, and made an atonement for the children of Israel. What I want to talk about real briefly here is this idea of righteousness. This idea of a priest of Elohim standing up for righteousness. And I want to ask you the question. In light of everything we see going on around us today, I mean, this week alone, in this nation, Dr. Joe made an allusion to it in the prayer time. But in this nation alone of the United States of America, this past week, some things came down from the executive branch and the judicial branch that were wicked and heinous against marriage, against that promoted a deviancy at the most rank level that Elohim calls an abomination. What are we to do about this? Well, that's a very difficult question, and I can't answer it for you. But I can give you spiritual guidelines. And it will be up for you to pray. You know, obviously, none of us have a national, international standing in the eyes of this world. But we do have connections to the mighty King. And we have spiritual power and authority that He has given us through Yeshua the Messiah. And I want to talk about this just a little bit. I'm going to deal with this more at Sukkot this year, but I want to just touch a few things. And ask the question, well, let me just, 2 Timothy 2, verse 3. 2 Timothy 2, verse 3. And you probably know this scripture. In fact, this is going to be one of our theme scriptures for Sukkot this year. 2 Timothy 3, but know this, verse 1, but know this, that in the last days perilous times will come. For men will be lovers of themselves, lovers of money, boasters, proud, blasphemers, disobedient to parents. And it goes on, unthankful, unholy, unloving, and a whole list of things. Despisers of good, lovers of pleasure rather than lovers of God, etc., etc. From such turn away, end of verse 5. From such turn away. You know, you ask yourself, you read the news and you say, could it get worse? You see, I don't know about you, but I read the news quite, a lot every day. I have to stay informed. And I say, what more could come out of darkness and evil that's worse than what I read yesterday? And lo and behold, the next day I read something worse. I mean, I could give examples of them just this week, and you could too. Things that only the most perverted minds could come up with that people are doing. And that's now being legalized, and judges are voting in favor, or ruling in favor of these perversions. And it's going on not only in this nation, but all around the world. So we are living in perilous times. So let me ask you, hearkening back to Pinchas, and he was a priest of Elohim, and he stood up for righteousness. Who are the priests of Elohim on this earth today? I think you all know the answer, but let's review it. Who are the priests of Elohim? You may not be a descendant of Levi, or of Aaron, or even of Pinchas or Phinehas. But there's another priesthood, and I'm not going to elucidate and articulate this as fully as it could be. I'm just going to skim over the top of the waves. But we read in 1 Peter 2:7, Peter says, you are a royal priesthood. Talking to the saints. It's the Melchizedek priesthood. 3 places in the book of Revelation, John says that the saints are going to be called kings and priests in Elohim's kingdom in the millennium. What do kings and or you could say a kingdom of priests, as it says in Shemot or Exodus 19 verse 6, which is what Israel was supposed to become, and they kind of failed at their mission. Well, I'd say kings and priests works, a kingdom of priests, but Yeshua is the King of Kings, so there's going to be kings in the millennium. And you may be a king over a city, I don't know. Or you may be a priest. A king rules according to the Torah, and he enforces the laws, and then he follows the laws of the Torah. And the priests are the ones that taught the Torah, or taught the whole, not only the Torah, but the whole word. It's based on the Torah. And they executed judgment. They were the judges and the lawyers. So together, the kings and the priests, they ruled. And you are preparing for that now. Now, we don't have the same legal authority, let's say, that Phinehas had, or King David, or Moses, because they were leaders of their own nation. We're not leaders of the nation now. We're leaders in the spiritual kingdom, but we don't have legislative, judicial, or executive authority. There are people in this democracy, it's become a democracy, that vote for people, and those are the people that do that. But we still have responsibilities, even as Yeshua and his disciples did in his day, because they were under the dominion of Rome, and they did not have ultimate authority when it came to life and death and these kinds of things. The Romans did. And most of you know that. However, Yeshua gave his authority to his disciples to do certain things. And I want to talk about that real briefly. Yeshua is our great high priest. And he has tasked his disciples, that's us, with the responsibility and authority to judge righteously. In other words, to judge according to the righteous standards of Yehovah, which is the Torah. In John 7:24, and I hate to pluck scriptures out of context, but I'm really not doing it because I know what it says there. But he says to judge righteous judgment. He's speaking to his disciples. We are called, in a general sense, to judge righteous judgment. Everywhere we go, we're making decisions, we're judging and evaluating things. Just in our day-to-day lives. Well, that's good, that's not. I like that, I don't like that, whatever. We need to be judging on the basis of the word of Elohim. Not on the basis of what the society says, or what the mores of society, or what we think, or what our denomination says, or what our friends are doing, or our family traditions are, or even what the laws of the land say, especially if they go against the word of Elohim. We are to judge on the basis of righteous judgment, which is the word of Elohim. And this responsibility, and then he says we are to be spiritual fruit inspectors. In Matthew 7, the Sermon on the Mount, starting in verse 15 through 20, he says you were to judge the fruit. If it's an apple tree and it has apples on it, then it's an apple tree. If you look at it and it's got thorns on it and brambles, then it's a weed. It's a thorn bush. And that's a form of judgment. You look at the fruits. Now we're to judge righteous judgment, not hypocritical judgment, as it says in Matthew 7 verse 1, where Yeshua said, judge not that you be not judged. And then he talks about the beam and the plank, and talking about people that are pointing their fingers at other people that are guilty of the same thing themselves. That's unrighteous or hypocritical judgment. We're not to be involved in that. If you're guilty of something, you better not take somebody else to task for it. You better shut your mouth and get your own life cleaned up. And then maybe you'll be in a position to help somebody else out. Maybe. So, he has called us to judge righteous judgment. Also, he says in the Sermon on the Mount in chapter 5 of Matthew that the saints are called to be light on a hill and to be salt in the earth. Well, light, as you know, is is in contradistinction to darkness. Salt is a seasoning agent, a cleansing agent, a purifying agent that acts in that manner to clean up the defilement around it, or to purify, or whatever the case may be, or to make the food palatable. So that's what we are called to do. So he's given us the authority to judge righteous judgment, and then to lead by example, by being light and being salt, which is going to affect the world around us. And hopefully, by being light, like a lighthouse, we're going to lead people that are wandering around out in the seas of humanity, lead them to Yeshua, who is the light of the world, and we are simply the lesser lights, really like the moon that reflects the light of the sun in the darkness of the world. That's all we are. But we're reflecting the greater light. His face shines like the sun, as it says in Revelation 1, and he is the Son of righteousness, as it says in Malachi, I think it's 4, I think it's verse 3. He is the Son, S-U-N, of righteousness. We don't worship the Son, but that's a picture of him. The Son is. So I believe that the saints, we have authority and the commission to act as the spiritual and moral compass and conscience of our nation, the nation in which we live. This means that we will be standing against evil wherever, however, the Spirit of Elohim and the Word of Elohim directs us, even as Phinehas did. I don't think this is an illogical jump. I think I'm exegeting the Scriptures line by line by line and showing right up to our point how this applies to us. I think it's as solid as a mathematical equation. I like to connect the dots in the Scriptures so that it helps us to show us how to walk. Now, like I said, we live in perilous times. And I believe it's time for the righteous servants of Elohim to stand up. About 7 years ago, when Multnomah County in Portland took it upon itself to begin to perform homosexual marriages. That's an oxymoron. It's not possible. But that's why I put it in quotes. Homosexual marriages at the county courthouse in Portland. And they already had performed hundreds of them, and there was kind of a cry among some of the people in Portland that, hey, you didn't have any hearings about this. You didn't have any public hearings. You just started doing it. They're on the footsteps of the courthouse. Actually, it wasn't the courthouse. It was the county offices there on the east side of the river. So they opened up. They had 2 or 3 days of testimonies, and I went in for, I think it was the 3rd day. I went in as a pastor, and I testified. There were several hundred people in the room, and I testified. They gave us 2 minutes. So I had a little speech all prepared for 2 minutes. And I sat in front of these county commissioners. And there was about 300 people in the room. There was like 50 or 60 people that testified for 3 hours. And I was toward the end. And I got up. I still have the text of what I said on my computer. And I got up. And this is what I told them. I told them, and I pointed my finger right at those commissioners, because I had a word. I told the Lord, if you give me a word, you put a word in my mouth, I'll give it to them. But I don't want it to be in the flesh. I want it to be, you put it in my mouth. And he gave me a word, and I gave it to them. I told them, I says, you can't help yourself. You guys, as leaders, have lost your moral compass, and you're going down. You think you're pretty hot. I didn't say, I mean, this, I'm just, I told him, I said, you think you're pretty smart because you've found a way to, do this. I said, I said, you're going to win the victory. You're going to win the victory. I said, you're going to get it. You're going to get this through the state, and you're going to get it eventually. I prophesied, you're going to get homosexual marriage in this state. Now, it was right after that they voted the one man, one woman would pass. But trust me, it's going to get overturned. most likely. We're moving in that direction with what happened this week. I told him, I said, you're going to get your way in this state. But I said, Elohim has the final word on this, and you're going to be revealed for who you are. And I looked at them and I said, and there's going to be a rising up in the future of righteousness against what you're doing. And I told him, I said, I don't hold you responsible. I said, it's not your fault. I said, you're doing just what comes naturally. I said, you and the rest of this nation have lost your moral compass. This is exactly what, you've lost your moral compass. You don't know right from wrong. I told him this. I pointed my finger and I spoke like this. I said, you don't know right from wrong. It's not your fault. I said, I'll tell you who I blame. I said, I blame the pastors, the Jewish rabbis, the priests, all the religious leaders in this nation. I said, because they have, for the last 100 years, they have not, by and large, have not been standing up. If you think I'm wrong, go read Francis Schaeffer or some of these guys. They wrote about it a long time ago. They're the ones that said it. And I told them this. I said, and I said, well, the day is coming when that's going to change. And these leaders, spiritual leaders, will be judged, and God's going to rise up righteousness in this land. I had 2 minutes to say that. I don't mean to digress, but I was the only one of all the people that witnessed that made it on all 3 networks of the 11 o'clock news that night. Two interviewed me, 2 cameras interviewed me, and one videotaped my speech, and they put it on the 11 o'clock news. I was the only one out of like 60. I'm telling you, when you stand up for what's right, Elohim can magnify your voice. And you do what He's called you to do. And that's happened to me. I've had that happen several times. This was just one more recently. So, I asked a question. I don't ask the question. Yehovah asked the question through King David in Psalm 94:16. In Psalm 94:16, the question is asked, who will rise up for me against the evildoers, or who will stand up for me against the workers of iniquity? Who will rise up for me, Yehovah Elohim, or who will stand against the evildoers, or who will stand up for me against the workers of iniquity? And then I asked the question, if not me, who? If not now, when? Now, I am not in any way, shape, or form advocating armed insurrection or violence or anything like that. I used the example of Pinchas as an example of righteousness. We do not have the authority to kill. I'm not advocating that. Pinchas did, because they had their own nation, and he was a ruler in that nation and a judge. Just like judges in this nation have the legal right to sentence people to death or to imprison them or whatever, penalize them. We don't have that right. But there are a lot of things we can do. And the reason these things are happening is because the church has remained silent, because too many pastors and leaders, it's money, money, money. They have watered down the gospel message because they're on the take. They've watered down the gospel message because they're busy feathering their own nests. They don't preach the truth and nothing but the truth because they want to tickle the ears of their congregations and constituency, so the giving units will keep giving so that they don't have to go get a real job like the rest of us have. As a pastor, I rebuke them. There's good ones, but I'm rebuking the phony baloney ones, which is the majority. Go read Ezekiel 34. Elohim's going to raise up pastors like the Apostle Paul and like others who do not live off the fat of the land and do not, who have a heart. They're not hirelings. And they don't care how many people are in their congregation. They want to teach the truth. They don't care about the praises of men. They care about the praise of Elohim. Okay, let's not dwell on that one. I had to get that point in because it's an important point. That's why we have come to this place, I believe, in this nation. Now, somebody's got to stand up against the tide of evil. Look, we've got people out here that are involved in demonic religions. I emphasize the word satanic and demonic religions. They talk about holy wars. They talk about being a martyr for their demon satanic god. And they do it in the name of their founder, who was a demon-possessed pedophile. Make no mistake about it. They are zealous for what they do. Look, the devil and his cohorts are zealous for what they do. It's time that we rise up. And again, I don't know what that would be. Sometimes it just could be whatever. Pray about it. But just be wherever you're at in your life, just take the next step and begin to stand up. It may be something you say to your neighbor. Let your light shine, be salt, be light, whatever. But we got to start thinking along those lines, and I believe then the Father will start leading us by His Spirit what He wants us to do. And I don't have any agendas. I just want us to be righteous and stand up for righteousness, because that's what we've been called to do. And the Bible is full, from the beginning to the end, of people that stood up for righteousness. Go read Hebrews 11. Let me give you a few examples. These are ones you all know. We have the Hebrew midwives that stood up when Pharaoh said, kill all the newborn boys. They said no. Elohim blessed them for it. Well, of course, we have Pinchas. Well, Moses stood up against Pharaoh. How could we miss that one? Let my people go. Pinchas, or Phinehas, we just read about him. We have the three Hebrew children in Daniel chapter 3. We read about that in this week's scripture readings. When you hear the music, bow down before this idol. No. And you know about the fiery furnace. Daniel, also we read about it in this week's Torah portion, or scripture readings. And Daniel prayed, and his enemies passed a law, or got the king to pass a law, that you're not to pray to any god except the king. And they caught Daniel praying. He prayed 3 times a day to Yehovah Elohim, and they got him red-handed. And the king reluctantly, sadly, threw him in, because he liked Daniel, into the lion's den. And you know the story. He was delivered. There's John the Baptist. Herod, you are in adultery. Cut his head off. Stop that mouth from speaking. Yeshua turned the money changers' tables over. He rebuked the Pharisees. Go read Matthew 23. There's 9 rebukes in that one alone. Peter and John in Acts chapter 4. Acts chapter 4. When the Jewish leaders said, you cannot preach in the name of Yeshua. Stop it. And they'd put them in prison. They said, we're going to follow Yeshua. You can't tell us. There's a time and a place to stand up. Noah, he preached righteousness against the utterly corrupt generation of his day. Remember David standing up against Goliath. Little old David. Yeah, let these inspire you. Elijah confronting the prophets of Baal and Ahab and Jezebel. Stephen confronting the religious leaders of his day. Paul and Silas preaching against the false religion in Philippi. And they preached in the streets of Thessalonica and Corinth and Ephesus. There were times when Yehovah tried to find such a person who would stand for his truth but was unable to do so. Jeremiah 5 verse 1. Ezekiel 22, verse 30. Let me leave you with this. This is, we sing that song, The Days of Elijah. That's a wonderful song. We all love it. Most people don't even have a clue what it means. There needs to be additional verses to that song. We are that Elijah generation, that John the Baptist generation. What does that mean? Is it just what we all sing a song and feel good and get all happy and dance and, and blow our shofars and then go home and whatever? This is real. This is business. Some people might lose their lives in it. John the Baptist did. Whoa. Yeshua did. And a lot of other people did. Prophets and whatnot. Look, the king comes only after he's been announced and the way has been prepared for the king. In this case, Yeshua is the king and he's coming. There was a time of preparation to prepare for his first coming, even as there will be for his second coming. And there will be witnesses who will stand up, even as John the Baptist did. He was outside the religious system of his day. There's a very good possibility that he should have been the legitimate high priest. It's speculation, but if you studied out, he probably should have been the high priest. The people that were the high priests, at that time there were two of them, Ananias and Caiaphas, they were not the legitimate high priests. They were the politically correct, bought and paid for high priests, but they were not the sons of Zadok. There's a very good possibility that John the Baptist, Yochanan the Immerser, was in that lineage. A lot of good circumstantial evidence. We really don't know. We'll find out someday. But anyway, he stood up and he prepared the way. And he was like Elijah the prophet. Yeshua said that. And who is going to be that prior to the second coming? Maybe he will resurrect Elijah. Maybe he will resurrect John the Baptist. I don't know. We know two witnesses are coming in Revelation 11. And there's a lot of speculation about who they are. I don't have any revelation as to who they are. And there's a lot of good possibilities. But nonetheless, in a general sense, he is raising up that Elijah generation now to prepare the way for Messiah. And part of that means that he's going to raise up Pinchases and these kinds of people that will stand without regard to their own personal safety, just like Pinchas stood in the middle between the sin and the judgment, and he made intercession, and he stopped the plague by executing judgment. Now, I don't know what we've been called to do. I don't know what you've been called to do. I know I've been called to teach and to preach and to help people point people in the way to go, and to be a watchman on the wall and to sound the shofar and just keep sounding it every means possible, through the written word, through the spoken word, wherever I go. And then when he directs me, go out on a street corner, go to a prison, go to here, go to there, go to a lead, whatever. And I've been to a lot of places over the years. I just want to encourage you. It's time for the righteous to stand up. Elohim's not up in heaven wringing his hands. Oh my, I lost this round, I lost this game, I lost this battle. He's wiping his brow. Boy, my kingdom's just falling to pieces. I don't know how I'm going to work this thing out. He's not up there wringing his hands, the creator of the universe, I guarantee you. And we don't need to be wringing our hands. Yes, we are those who sigh and cry for the abominations done in our nation, like it says in Ezekiel, about what was going on. It's in chapter 6, what was going on in Jerusalem at the time. And I do sigh and cry. But it's not going to render me inoperative and unable or paralyzed or paranoid to do anything. I will do whatever I can. We certainly can pray, we can intercede, we can be salt and light to those around us, we can reach out to those around us. If you can, you have internet abilities or you can go places, pray and ask the Father for direction. And if enough people, to use a cliche, are 1,000 points of light, but not in the New World Order sense, but in the God's world order sense, or Elohim, it can make a difference. And don't think that what little thing you do can make a difference. Who will despise the day of small beginnings? It just takes a few people to begin to get the ball rolling, as the Spirit of God leads. So I want to leave you with that and encourage you that you are the modern day priests, and you are the Elijah generation, the John the Baptist generation. And so be inspired from these mighty men and women of the faith in the Bible, from all the way up till the closing of the Scriptures, who stood for their faith. And be encouraged, and don't let go, and don't be discouraged, because greater is He that is in us than he that is in the world. Amen.
Seek the Lord while He may be found. Call upon His name. He is near. He is near. He is near. Yeshua Hashem Be'ir Matzov Kerabu